Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys, with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For the next half hour, we've got a couple of experts assembled here to talk about a subject matter that we believe is of interest to you. And tonight's topic, I believe you're going to agree, it's something you're going to want to listen for and answer some questions that I bet you have wondered. So that's coming up. A couple of ground rules of how things work around here. You'll see at the bottom of the screen a way you can join our conversation. Love for you to do so. Your questions are always the best questions. And Hollis Wright makes available attorneys standing by live all throughout the program to take your calls. So that's the opportunity for you to speak directly with an attorney. That is a free, confidential, off-air conversation, so take advantage of that opportunity. Leading our conversation, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you.
You too.
You doing all right?
I'm doing great. Hope you're doing great.
Doing well. Thank you very much.
Interesting statistics.
All right.
Every 6 minutes, a cyclist in this country passes away due to an accident.
Oh, goodness.
And we have 50,000 cycling accidents a year, many that happen in Alabama. There are a lot of questions that I have.
Me too.
When I'm driving on the road and I say cyclist, kind of what are the rules of the road? We're going to be talking about that today.
Good.
When we talk about cycling experts, we got Danny Feldman. First of all, Danny, so glad you're on.
It's good to be here.
Danny works over at Lewis and Feldman here in town, does a lot of this litigation, handles a lot of these cases. And this is one of those circumstances where if we're not an expert in the area, we're going to find someone that is, and Danny is. And so super happy to have you on tonight and be able to talk about this.
Really glad to be here.
Absolutely. So how did you get into this area? This is a kind of a unique area. There aren't a lot of lawyers that do this. How'd you get into it?
I have lousy knees, and I couldn't exercise and run like I wanted to, so I started cycling that way. And then what happened was I had two very close friends of mine that were hit on Lakeshore by a drunk driver at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. They were really terribly injured. And what it did was, you know, I've been practicing law for years by then. It allowed me to combine my hobby, passion, cycling, with my legal profession. And that was about a decade and a half ago, 15 years ago. And so because of that, I started representing injured cyclists all around the state and have made that a big part of my practice.
Now, I know that you probably, since you do this type of law, you get people on both sides of the issue here. Sometimes you've got folks that say, hey, these cyclists are contributing to accidents, and others that are on the cycling side saying, look, we've got rules and responsibilities, but we've also got rights too.
Sure.
How do you play between those two? Because I know that comes up a lot.
Oh, it does. Well, the law is clear. Cyclists have a right to be on the road. They are considered to be vehicles, and they have the same rights, but of course that means the same obligations. And you know, you do hear people talk about a cyclist running a red light or not stopping for a red light. Fine, they ought to get a ticket because they have violated the rules of the road. It doesn't mean you should run them over with your car and be judge, jury, and executioner. And unfortunately, and of course that's the minority of folks, but unfortunately you see that. You see road rage, and it goes both ways. It goes both ways, but in my experience, there's more rage coming from the motorist, number one. Number two, the motorist can do a lot more damage. A 2,000-pound car versus 200-pound bicycle.
So, Danny, I've always wondered when a cyclist is operating, going the same direction as my car. Every once in a while, I'll see a cyclist going the opposite direction, but in my side. Why do they go the same direction that our cars normally go as opposed to sometimes the opposite?
Sure. Well, they go the same direction as cars because they are considered vehicles.
Okay.
And so they go the same direction, have the same rules. And of course, from a motorist perspective, that's where you expect them to be. For instance, take an example, you come to a T intersection and you're going to make a right-hand turn. You look left to see that someone's not coming, whether it's a car or a bicycle. If someone's coming from the right, from the opposite direction, you're not going to look. And that's what happens. And that's why when you see cyclists going the wrong way, I mean, they are violating the law, and they are a danger to themselves and to you, the motorist.
Another issue that I see a lot is cyclists will be 3 wide, sometimes as opposed to 1 deep. How does that work, and what are the rules there?
Sure.
I wonder that when I pass them.
That's a fair question. The law says cyclists are to ride as far as to the right as practicable. That doesn't mean they have to be going over the edge. It also gives cyclists the right to ride 2 abreast, not 3 abreast. So if cyclists are riding 3 abreast, they are violating the law, pure and simple. The reason why they're allowed to ride 2 abreast is, imagine you're going to pass a group of 20 cyclists and they're single file. So imagine if instead of 20 single file, you have 10 2 abreast. It's a lot easier to pass that way, and they're easier to be seen. Yeah. So that's why the law gives cyclists the right to ride 2 abreast, but not 3.
What about passing? I mean, okay, if they are a vehicle, and you know, my car can go 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. Not supposed to be 80. Okay, 60 miles per hour. A bike can't. So does the line have to be, you know, the slashed, or whenever I can I pass the bike?
You can pass when it's safe. Right. And recently, and I say recently, a couple of years ago, Alabama joined our neighboring states and passed the 3-foot passing law. And so you are supposed to give cyclists 3 feet when you pass them. The law applies on roads where the speed limit is 45 or less and no double yellow line. There's no case law about whether or not it would apply above 45, but because you're supposed to be reasonable, my position would be, if you have to give 3 feet on roads 45 and less, you have to give more than 3 feet on high-speed roads.
So that brings up an interesting issue. So when you're litigating these cases on behalf of a cyclist that's been hit, for example, by a vehicle that was passing, I'm sure that happens a lot.
Absolutely.
What are you looking for? Because I think it could help our viewers that are oftentimes in their cars. What are you looking for to determine whether or not they violated, if you will, the rules of the road in protecting cyclists? Because you kind of have a duty, no different than another vehicle, to protect the people that you're passing.
Absolutely. Well, one case I had fairly recently was on John Rogers Road, which is a wide 5-lane road, 2 lanes in either direction and a middle turning lane. And a motorist came up behind a cyclist, said they saw the cyclist and still hit them. Because of the 3-foot law, I was able to file a motion for summary judgment saying you violated this 3-foot law. It's undisputed. And what that means is, if the judge rules in your favor, liability is determined. And I thought we had a good shot, and the case got settled, but I thought we were going to win that motion. So it's a helpful law in that sense.
So you actually moved as a matter of law to try and win the case in that respect.
Which is, as you know, is unusual.
Yeah, that's very unusual for a plaintiff to win that. I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, one of the things I don't think the viewing audience realizes is, if you're cycling and you're injured, you may have the ability to argue that uninsured motorist is applicable in your case. We're going to talk about that when we come back, because I think that's an important component.
All right. We'll step aside right here. We're coming right back. We have more of the attorneys, so stick around. We'll be right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
All about bicycling and the rules of the road for those cyclists. Boy, we got to do a better job of looking out for them for sure. Welcome back in to the attorneys. A reminder before we head back to our conversation, attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by right now, ready to speak with you. So take advantage of that opportunity. Call the number you see on your screen, that confidential, off-air, free conversation, and that opportunity is there for the taking for you. Josh?
You know, and a lot of times I think people question whether or not there are actually lawyers that are there standing by live to answer calls, texts, and emails, but there are. Tonight, people are there, our lawyers are there trying to answer calls and emails and texts and answer legal-related questions. And, you know, we often say, and sometimes the scroll will dictate that if you have a question that's not on topic, that's
right.
Okay. We may not be able to answer it perfectly that night, but we're going to get you to somebody. So if you got a legal-related issue, don't be intimidated to call a lawyer. Super, super important.
There'll be a voice on the other end.
Now, when we were in break, I know that you pulled this, and I wanted us to talk about this. This is a legal handbook for cyclists that Danny brought. And just tell us a little bit about what this is, because it's got a lot of interesting information in it.
Sure.
Can you hold that up?
We recently put this together. It's called the Alabama Ride Guide, and it breaks down the laws that apply to cyclists. And it's written for the layman. We cite the statutes so someone can go look at it, but it's written very directly, very basic, tells you what the law is as regards cycling, period.
And so, for example, one of the things I noted in here when David pulled it was hand signals. Is a cyclist required to give hand signals? No different than a vehicle is required to give, like, changing lane signals?
The short answer is yes. The interesting thing about the Alabama statute is it specifically states the hand signal for a right-handed turn. It doesn't mention left-handed turn.
Right.
The best interpretation is it's the same for left as right, except you use the left hand for left and the right hand for right. But yes, your cyclists, the key is to be predictable. Yeah. To be predictable. And you want to, if you're going to make a right-hand turn, you should signal that you're going to make a right-hand turn.
How does all this apply? There are all these new types of bikes out there, like e-bikes, and how does all this apply? Are the rules going to be similar?
That's a very interesting question, Josh. There's no laws that deal with e-bikes in Alabama right now.
What are e-bikes?
Yeah. E-bikes are bikes that have an electric motor and they assist the cyclist. So you're still cycling, but a motor kicks in, so it makes it easier.
You're dating yourself.
I guess.
You're dating yourself.
Well,
we have phones. You can text on them.
Right, I got it.
Yeah, you know, interestingly, y'all may have seen the Birds, the scooters that showed up, and then the city of Birmingham and Homewood impounded them, and they're not bicycles. And the law is even more in flux with them because they're not considered street legal, which is different than a bicycle, which is. And right now, that issue is going to be the legislature is supposed to hear that this spring, and we'll see what happens with those.
Was all the impounding, was that a permitting issue?
They didn't get their license.
Okay, fair enough.
They didn't get their license, and they dropped off the bikes in Birmingham, Homewood, Tuscaloosa, and that's what happened.
All right, let's talk about this. When we went to break, we talked a little bit about uninsured motorist coverage, and I know you have to advise people a lot of times. Somebody runs them off the road and leaves the scene of the accident, maybe intentionally or maybe unintentionally,
right.
Or someone causes an accident in a vehicle and they don't have insurance. How do you handle the uninsured motorist side? And let's kind of walk through that a little
bit.
bit.
People don't think about this, but what happens if you're riding your bike down the road, someone runs you off the road, you get hurt, they're gone, you don't know who they are. We refer to that as a phantom vehicle. Your own automobile insurance under the uninsured motorist policy applies. It applies anytime you are injured by an uninsured motorist. And in that case, the phantom vehicle is considered uninsured. So you can recover against your own carrier. You have to put them on notice of the claim immediately. It applies if you're jogging, if you're sitting on, getting sun in your yard, and you're injured by a car that either has no insurance or that leaves the scene. One other thing that's coming up now more and more with technology is many bicyclists have cameras now. Cyclists is one of them, GoPro's another. But when people run them off the road, you know, it's when you get run off the road, it's hard to get the license plate. Yeah. But these cameras do. And so you can, of course, capture that image and then run down the person, and they won't be a phantom vehicle anymore.
How does our area do in terms of making space available for bicycles? Are we a bike-friendly area?
You know, it's not. But the short answer is there's not a lot of infrastructure specifically designed for bicycles. That's the short answer. The longer answer is really Birmingham and the surrounding communities. They're pretty good areas to ride, and there's some well-known cycling routes where people ride their bikes a lot, and people that live there, they may or may not like it, but they know that it's there. So not a lot of specified infrastructure, even though that's improving, but good places to ride around town.
What do you do if someone runs you off the road, you're on your cycle, you're badly injured, and they leave the scene of the accident? I mean, is the goal to try and get to counsel quickly so that they can kind of lead, guide, and direct you through the process of making application to your uninsured motorist coverage? I mean, how does that normally work?
Absolutely. You want to get up with a lawyer immediately so that they can start the investigation of the claim, because the longer it goes without being investigated, the tougher it is to find out who it was. Of course, you also have a duty to place your own automobile carry-on notice as soon as possible. Courts give you some time, but if you don't hire a lawyer and you don't know to do that, you can actually lose that valuable coverage.
And one of the things we sometimes talk about is this uninsured motorist concept. Don't forget too, Dave, that it can apply to underinsured motorists, where if you're significantly injured and the person that caused the accident has limited coverage, underinsured coverage can also apply, where it can gap fill and fill in for you in circumstances where you're badly injured. We do a lot of UM shows. Danny's exactly right. This UM coverage can be very, very applicable. I want to talk to him when I think we're getting ready, or we're getting close.
We got a couple of minutes.
Okay, good. One of the things I wanted to talk about, let's just go to it now, is kind of the stuff that you see. I know, we have accidents that we've talked about a little bit where folks are run off the road, but what are some of the other things that you see on the cycling side? And another question that I know people would want to know, have you ever represented someone against a cyclist because they did something wrong or caused it?
Short answer to the second question is no.
And he's all in then. He's all in cycling.
Well, one reason for that too is when you're riding your bicycle, you typically don't have insurance coverage.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's one issue. Some of the places where you see the most conflicts between bikes and cars are the same where you see conflicts between car and cars. But we call it the right hook. Cyclist is riding down the road, car overturns them, makes it right in front of them. That often happens because people think cyclists are going 5 miles an hour, and maybe you are up a steep hill. But lots of times cyclists are going 20, 25, 30, and it's harder to overtake them than you think, and then they got to make that right turn. So we see that, the right hook. Another one, is the left cross. Same thing, cyclists and car going in different directions, and a car makes a left-hand turn in front of the cyclist. That's when you hit and go over, and you see a lot of broken collarbones. And then just a simple intersection running the red light. The one cyclists fear the most, which fortunately don't happen as much, is you're riding and someone just plows into you from behind. That does happen, not as much as the intersection ones.
Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that Danny sees, but also just some of the tricks of the trade if you're driving, how to avoid road rage, because road rage is a huge component, car on car, but also cycle on car.
Yep. All right, we're going to step aside right there as we head to break. A couple of reminders of how you can keep up with Hollis Wright and all that's going on. A great resource they are on social media, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. Just search Hollis Wright and you'll find them there. Great way to kind of keep up with what's going on at the firm, but also really helpful educational, informational resource. So take advantage of that. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WBTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Just a few minutes remaining, so if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with an attorney that's live, free, off air, take advantage of that. Just a few minutes remaining. Danny, when we came in from break talking about helmets, the firm fact did, got questions about helmets. Are helmets required, and what about lights?
Helmets are required if you're 16 and under. There is no requirement if you're over 16. It's strongly recommended, though, that you should wear helmets. There's a lot of studies that show that it cuts down on injury. So that's the answer on helmets. With lights, cyclists need to be seen. And the law is very clear. At night, you're supposed to have a front light that you can see from 500 feet. The code says you're to have a red reflector visible from 500 feet. You know, what I tell cyclists is put the reflector on so you meet the code, but you want to have a red blinky light or a green blinky light. You want to be seen. Right. So definitely do that. The code does not define nighttime, so there's arguments that we have in some of these cases when it's dusk or dawn. I think the most reasonable definition of nighttime would be when it's nighttime, which is sun's 18 degrees above or below the horizon. You really can't see without light.
What have you, in your experience, you've been cycling how many years?
Oh, since 35.
Injuries. Well, you got injuries?
Do I have injuries?
Yeah. Like, is this common? Is it common for someone to have? I
have gone down, yes. I've gone down once. My chain jumped and I went down and had a pin put in my thumb. And that is, I cracked my helmet. I cracked it from here all the way. I mean, the whole helmet was cracked. And I was on the Homewood City Council when that happened, and I helped get the bike law passed in Homewood, and then that got adopted by the state. But it was that experience that because it could have been my head.
I was going to ask you about some of that stuff. A lot of these cities have their own separate ordinances about when you can ride, those types of things. What is that, just city-based? Like somebody kind of championed that and got it approved in a local municipality, and they came up with a rule that cyclists have to follow? And if you're a cyclist, if that's accurate, if you're a cyclist, should you know the local code?
Sure, absolutely. You should know the code. What the law allows cities to have more comprehensive laws than the state allows. Now, the law would not allow a city to say you can't ride your bike, because that would violate the state law which controls. And you see some of those issues around the nation that come up. But a city can have more comprehensive laws. And for instance, Homewood did initially when it passed that bike helmet law. The state adopted it a year later.
Yeah, and I noticed a case that we had in a local municipality. The municipal law was more applicable to our circumstance than the state law was. So a lot of times, if you're litigating these cases, you got to make sure that you look at both those things.
Yeah, what about sidewalks? Why? I got a question here. Why do cyclists not use the sidewalks instead of the roads?
Sure, and people ask that all the time. First, bicycles are considered vehicles under the code. And so as it would be unlawful for a vehicle to ride on the sidewalk, so it is for a cyclist. In addition, you think about it, bicycles can move pretty fast, 20, 30 miles an hour. Pedestrians, walking, dogs, children, it creates an inherent conflict. Additionally, if you're going the opposite way of traffic on the sidewalk, in other words, you're crossing from the street in an area that people wouldn't expect you to be, it can create conflict with motor vehicles. So for all those reasons, you're not supposed to ride on the sidewalk.
Real quickly, I wanted to ask you about, just for folks to be on the lookout for this, construction in local municipalities where it's not properly marked and bikes get involved in construction zones without actually recognizing you're about to get into. We recently had a case like that where somebody hit a pipe that was left out, significant injury. I know that's something you guys have to look at.
Sure.
But in those circumstances, get to a lawyer early?
Oh, absolutely. And we had an interesting case like that in a local municipality where they were doing work and they had created a 3-inch difference between the roadway and of course the car wouldn't be injured, but a cyclist hit it, went over, had very bad injuries. And the law does require, Alabama law is good on this, it requires municipalities to keep roadways safe, not only for cars, but for bicycles.
Almost out of time, but time enough for a final thought from the both of you. And Danny, if you would, you go first, please.
Just real quick, lots of people get upset with bicyclists. It holds them up a few seconds sometimes. I just ask folks to realize that everyone cycling is somebody's mom or dad, brother, sister, husband, wife. I mean, they're people, and they need to be treated that way. And it's just a small price you pay to live in a civilized society. I mean, I get held up sometimes behind football game traffic or church traffic. I may not have gone to that service, but that's the price you pay for living with other people. And it's the same thing with cycling. As more people cycle, I do think attitudes would get better.
If we had more people that had this attitude, we'd all get along a lot better, right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure the viewing audience recognizes the importance of the way Danny works in a contingency fee arrangement. Just because you're able to get a lawyer doesn't mean that you have to pay for it unless you're successful. So the contingency fee arrangement is going to allow people to get the same quality of legal service you'd have on the insurance side, for somebody to investigate your claim, evaluate your claim, and assess if they're going to take it, and you don't pay anything in expenses and in fee unless you're successful. Right. So guys like Danny can help you out in that area.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Great job.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
We thank you as well for being with us each and every week. We'll look for you next time. Thanks so much for being with us here on The Attorneys, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.